There's a few different ways to solve quadratics, but let's talk about solving by factoring. I'll take us through this one. So when you're solving by factoring, the goal is to break your quadratic up into two factors whose product is 0. So if I do that, I end up with something times something is equal to 0. Now, if you're multiplying two things together and you get 0, you know that one of those two things has to be 0. We don't care which one, as long as at least one of them is 0. So for example, if my A is 0, I end up with 0 times B, and that will give me 0. I don't care what B is, because when I multiply whatever that number is by 0, I get 0. So my first answer comes from that first factor being 0. Now, with the same logic, I could have B is 0. So then I would have A being whatever it is times 0, and that would still give me 0. So when we have two factors whose product is 0, one or both of those factors has to be 0 in order for this to work out. So that's the logic we're going to use as we go through and solve the equation above. First thing I'm going to do is factor. My favorite method is to factor by grouping, but you can factor however you want. I'll go ahead and factor, and I'll meet up with you in just a second. Okay, so this is the factored form of my quadratic. Now what I'm going to do is use that logic that I talked about before. Maybe that first parentheses is 0. If this is 0, then I multiplied by, I don't really care what x plus 3 is. 0 times something is going to give me 0 like I want. So that means that that first parentheses, that first factor could equal 0. So x plus 2, as long as that's 0, everything's going to 0 out. And same thing goes for the x plus 3. If this x plus 3 is 0, then I don't really care what that first factor is, because when I multiply by 0, everything's going to 0 out. So I solve both of these and I'll have two different answers. Subtract 2, x is negative 2, or x is negative 3. So either of these solutions will work for your original quadratic. So that's a very quick example of how to solve a quadratic by factoring. Hope that helped. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.